In February 2022, Dmitri Volkov had everything. A penthouse overlooking the Moscow River, 3 luxury cars parked in a private garage, a business empire worth millions. He had built his life brick by brick over 15 years, and it was finally paying off. By March, he had a one-way ticket to Manila, 2 suitcases, and no idea his entire identity was about to collapse. This isn't a story about war. It's about what happens when a man who built his life on control loses all of it, and what he found in the last place he expected. Let's go back to the beginning. Dmitri wasn't a politician. He wasn't an oligarch. He wasn't connected to the Kremlin in any meaningful way. He ran a successful import-export business, working with European manufacturers and Russian distributors. Legal, profitable, honestly, kind of boring. He had a wife, Marina, a 12-year-old daughter, Katya, a comfortable life that felt earned, not inherited. But when the war started in late February, the bombs didn't reach him. The missiles didn't fall on his street. The tanks didn't roll through his neighborhood. The sanctions did, and they hit harder than any weapon ever could. Within the first week, his international bank accounts were frozen. Money he'd saved for years just gone. Inaccessible. Within 2 weeks, his business partners in Germany and France stopped returning his calls. Contracts he'd spent months negotiating were canceled overnight. No explanation, just silence. By week 3, his suppliers had cut him off. His shipping routes were blocked. His ability to travel freely to Europe, to do business, to maintain the life he'd built was restricted. Everything he'd worked for, everything held together by international trust and global connections, just stopped functioning. He'd wake up in the morning, check his phone, and see another door closing, another partnership ending, another account frozen. His wife asked him one night, "What are we going to do?" And he didn't have an answer. The decision to leave wasn't dramatic. There was no single moment. It was a slow, suffocating realization that staying meant watching everything crumble. He told Marina, "We need to leave, just for a few months, until this blows over, until things stabilize." She looked at him like she didn't believe him, but she packed anyway. Now, why the Philippines? That's the question everyone asks. Why not Turkey? Why not Dubai? Why not somewhere closer, somewhere more familiar? The answer's simple. It wasn't love. It wasn't some romantic vision of tropical paradise. It was practical. The Philippines had no visa restrictions for Russians. He could stay for months without paperwork nightmares. English was widely spoken, so he wouldn't be completely lost. The cost of living was cheap, which mattered when you're watching your savings drain. And it was far enough away that no one would ask too many questions. He wasn't moving to something. He was moving away from everything. He booked 3 tickets, one way, March 15th. He thought, "I'll wait this out somewhere cheap and quiet. Keep my head down. Preserve what's left of my money. Maybe 6 months, tops. By then, things will calm down. I'll rebuild." He landed in Manila with $400,000 in accessible cash, 2 suitcases per person, and a plan that would last exactly 3 weeks before reality set in. Dmitri rented a high-rise condo in Makati, Manila's financial district, 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, gym, pool, 24-hour security. It cost him $2,000 a month, which seemed like a bargain compared to Moscow. It looked like success. It felt like exile. His daughter Katya hated it immediately. "There's nothing to do here," she complained. "I want to go home." Marina tried to stay positive, but Dmitri could see the strain in her eyes. She missed her friends, her mother, her life, and Dmitri. He was operating on autopilot. Here's what he expected the Philippines to be: a backup plan, a cheaper, warmer version of Moscow, a place where his money would stretch further and his problems would stay smaller. Third world but tolerable, a place to wait. He'd traveled before. He knew how this worked. You find the expensive neighborhood. You stay in the expat bubble. You hire help. You keep your distance. You wait. He found an international school for Katya, expensive but familiar. He ate at expat restaurants serving Italian and Japanese food. He drank at expat bars where everyone spoke English and complained about traffic. He hired a Filipino assistant named Grace to handle logistics, but kept their conversations strictly transactional. He believed money would insulate him from everything, from culture shock, from loneliness, from having to actually engage with this place, from having to change. For the first 3 weeks it worked. He was busy, setting up the apartment, enrolling Katya in school, establishing routines, staying in motion so he didn't have to think. Month 2 hit differently. Back in Moscow, Dmitri's name meant something. When he walked into a business meeting, people knew his reputation. When he called someone, they picked up. He had a network. He had status. He had influence. Here, he was just another foreigner with money, and in a city full of expats, that meant nothing special. His friends back home had stopped replying to messages. At first, he thought it was the time difference. Then he realized it was something else. They'd moved on. They had their own problems, their own survival to worry about. His business contacts in Europe had gone completely silent. The people he'd worked with for years, shared meals with, built relationships with, they'd vanished, and he was stuck. Not physically, he could leave any time, but emotionally, psychologically, he was trapped. Here's what broke him. It wasn't poverty. He still had money. He wasn't struggling to eat or pay rent. It was invisibility. Back in Moscow, he walked into a room and people noticed. His name carried weight. His network opened doors. His wealth commanded respect. Here, he was nobody, just another sunburned foreigner ordering overpriced coffee and complaining about the heat. One afternoon in his 3rd month, his air conditioning broke. In Manila's heat, this isn't an inconvenience, it's a crisis. He called the building maintenance. They sent a technician, a guy named Carlo, maybe 30 years old, wearing a worn shirt and carrying a toolbox that had seen better days. Dmitri was frustrated, hot, irritable. He offered to pay double if Carlo could fix it immediately. Carlo looked at him, smiled patiently, and said, "Sir, I will fix it properly. Fast is not always good. If I rush, it breaks again next week. Then you call me again. Better I do it right now, yes?" Dmitri just nodded. He wasn't used to people pushing back, even gently. Carlo worked for an hour, methodically, carefully, not rushing. And while he worked, he talked, asked questions. "You're new here, sir." "Yes." "You like the Philippines?" "It's fine." "You look tired, sir. You okay?" And that question, that simple question, hit Dmitri like a punch to the chest. Because it was the first time in 2 months anyone had asked him that. The first time anyone had looked at him as a person, not a client or a foreigner or a source of income. "I'm fine," Dmitri lied. Carlo just nodded, like he understood exactly what fine meant. When he finished, he refused the extra money. "You pay what the building says." "Is enough, sir? You need anything? You call maintenance. I come back." After Carlo left, Dmitri sat in his newly cooled apartment and felt something he hadn't expected. Shame. Not because of anything Carlo said or did, but because he realized how he'd been treating people. Transactionally, distantly, like they were there to serve him, not as human beings with their own lives and dignity. Dmitri started noticing things after that. Small things. The way his neighbors in the building greeted each other every morning. Not just a nod, but actual conversations. Asking about each other's families. Sharing food. The way the security guards knew everyone's names. Not just the foreign tenants, but the cleaning staff, the delivery drivers, everyone. The way families gathered in small homes, spilling out onto the street during birthdays and holidays. Dozens of people crammed into tiny spaces, sharing food on paper plates, laughing like they had everything in the world. The way people smiled at him, even when he didn't smile back. And he started to realize something that made him deeply uncomfortable. These people, who had so much less than him materially, seemed happier, more connected, more at peace. While he, with his high-rise condo and his savings and his business experience, felt empty. Money doesn't buy belonging. Power doesn't equal peace. Control doesn't mean safety. 3 months in, sitting alone in his living room while Marina and Katya slept, Dmitri had a thought that terrified him. What if the war ends and I still don't want to go back? Not because Russia had changed, because he had changed, or rather because he realized he needed to change, and he didn't know if he could do that back home. Month 4. Something shifted. It started small. Dmitri stopped eating at expat restaurants every night. Too expensive, too isolated. He started trying local places, small carinderias where lunch cost 50 pesos, about $1. The first time he walked into one, everyone stared. A tall Russian man in expensive shoes, clearly out of place. But the owner, an older woman everyone called Auntie Beth, just smiled and asked what he wanted. He had no idea what anything was. She brought him adobo, rice, and a Coke. It cost 70 pesos, about $1.25. It was the best meal he'd had in months. Not because the food was fancy, it wasn't, but because it was real, unpretentious, made with care. He started going back, once a week, then twice, then almost daily. Beth learned his name, started setting aside extra rice for him, asked about his family. "Your daughter," she said one day, "she should come. I teach her Tagalog. She learned fast, I know." Dmitri brought Katya the next week. She was skeptical at first, but Auntie Beth won her over with halo and terrible jokes. Slowly things started changing. Dmitri moved out of the high-rise in Makati. The rent was bleeding him dry, and honestly, he felt like a fraud there. He found a smaller place in a mixed neighborhood, still safe, still comfortable, but real, where Filipinos and foreigners actually lived side by side. He started taking Filipino language lessons. Online at first, then with a tutor. He was terrible at it. His pronunciation was awful. His grammar was worse. But people appreciated that he tried. When he'd mangle a sentence at the market, vendors would laugh, correct him, and then usually give him a discount for effort. He stopped wearing his Rolex. Not because someone told him to, not because he was worried about theft, but because it felt wrong. It felt like he was trying to prove something that didn't matter anymore. Carlo, the AC technician, ran into him at a mall one day. They talked for a few minutes. Before leaving, Carlo said, "Sir, my nephew, he have birthday party this Sunday. You and your family, you come. Lots of food, lots of people. You come, okay?" Dmitri almost said no. A kid's birthday party with people he didn't know, in a language he barely spoke, but something made him say yes. The party was in a small house in Quezon City, maybe 50 people crammed into a space meant for 20. Kids running everywhere, karaoke blasting, tables covered with pancit, lumpia, lechon, rice, everything. Dmitri, Marina, and Katya showed up with a gift and immediately felt out of place. Within 10 minutes, they were holding plates of food and being introduced to everyone. "This is Tito Dmitri. He is from Russia, very far." People asked questions. Not invasive ones, just curious. "Where are you from? How do you like the Philippines? Do you miss the snow?" Katya ended up playing with the other kids. Marina was pulled into a conversation about schools with the mothers. Dmitri stood with the men, drinking cheap beer and attempting small talk in broken Tagalog. And then something happened that he didn't expect. Someone handed him the karaoke microphone. "Sing, sir! You sing!" "I don't sing," Dmitri protested. "Everyone sings, come on!" They queued up a song he'd never heard of. He butchered it completely. His accent was terrible. He forgot half the words. Everyone cheered anyway. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Dmitri laughed, really laughed. Not the polite chuckle of a business meeting, not the forced smile of social obligation, a real deep, from-the-gut laugh. On the drive home, Katya was talking excitedly about the party. Marina was smiling in a way she hadn't in months. And Dmitri realized something. He felt full, not full of food, though he'd definitely eaten too much. Full of something else, something he'd forgotten existed. Connection, community, belonging. Back in Russia, he'd been rich, successful, respected, but he'd been running on empty for years. Here, with less money, less status, less of everything he thought mattered, he felt like he could finally breathe. Month 6. Dmitri's consulting business started picking up. Small contracts, remote work. Nothing like his old empire, but steady. Enough. He wasn't trying to rebuild what he'd lost. He was building something different. Marina started volunteering at Katya's school, teaching English to local kids whose families couldn't afford private tutors. Katya stopped asking when they were going home. She had friends now, real friends. She spoke Tagalog better than Dmitri did. Dmitri started redefining what success meant. Not how much money you make, but how much peace you feel when you wake up. Not how many people know your name, but how many people actually know you. Really know you, not control, connection. He thought about his old life in Moscow, the stress, the constant pressure, the meetings that didn't matter, the relationships that were all business, no friendship. He'd been successful by every conventional measure, but he'd been miserable. He just hadn't known it because he was too busy to notice. Here he had time to think, time to be present, time to actually be a father, not just a provider. One evening, he and Carlo were sitting outside a Sari store drinking San Miguel. Carlo asked him, "You go back to Russia?" Dmitri thought about it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now." "You like it here?" "Yes," Dmitri said. "I think I do." Carlo nodded. "Good. Philippines needs more people who try, who care, not just tourists." They sat in comfortable silence, and Dmitri realized he wasn't waiting anymore. He wasn't in exile. He wasn't hiding. He was home, not because of the place, but because of who he was becoming here. It's been over a year now. Dmitri still lives in the Philippines. He hasn't gone back to Russia. Maybe he will someday. Maybe he won't. He runs a small consulting business online, works with international clients, makes enough. Not millions, enough. Marina is happy, really happy. She says she feels lighter here. Katya is thriving, bilingual, confident, connected. They live simply now, not by force, by choice. Dmitri doesn't miss the penthouse, doesn't miss the luxury cars, doesn't miss the status. He misses some people, some places, some foods, but he doesn't miss who he was. I asked him recently over coffee at Ate Best Carinderia, "Did the Philippines change you?" He thought for a long moment, stirring his coffee, watching people pass by outside. Then he said, "I thought I was escaping the war. I was actually escaping myself." He paused. "I came here thinking I was losing everything. My business, my status, my identity. And I was. I did lose all of that. But what I found," he smiled, "I found out what actually matters. And it wasn't any of the things I spent 15 years chasing. Sometimes the biggest changes happen in the quietest places. Sometimes losing everything is how you find out what you actually need. Sometimes running away is how you finally find your way home." Thanks for watching.